Welcome to Unscripted Coding. We have in front of us chatgpt, which of course is an AI chatbot. That's been the theme of the last couple of videos, and that's what I've been diving into. How does a business or a company deploy their own internal AI chatbot? Now, we've looked at a few options that Microsoft has done and made available, but today we're going to do a true unscripted coding session. We're going to try and create a ChatGPT-like interface and pair it with Azure OpenAI services. Now, the reason we do this, and I go over this every time, is that ChatGPT has not great privacy guarantees, and we actually don't know a whole lot about what they do security-wise. That means as a business, if you're putting in your business plans, if you're putting in sensitive information, ChatGPT is actually using it to train their model. And in theory, albeit quite unlikely, your business plan could be spat out to a competitor, verbatim. Possible. If you use an API like Azure OpenAI services, they're going to guarantee that they're not using your data to train other models. And also, Microsoft just has much more documentation and stricter guarantees about what they're going to do with your data. And so as a business or as a company, you should feel a little bit wary about using ChatGPT. On the other hand, if you can build your own internal chatbot built on top of Azure OpenAI services or other APIs that have those guarantees, you can use it a lot freer. You can rest a little easier knowing that your security and privacy is taken care of. Now, mind you, today we are building a single page application, and I believe, unless we have a lot of time, we're going to miss some very obvious security issues. We're going to do this in a quick fashion first, and then I can talk about how you can mask some of those bare exposed calls afterwards through other Microsoft services. But for now, I think it's important to just get something functional and working. Again, our inspiration is ChatGPT, so we're going to try and create something that looks quite similar. We're going to use Bootstrap, and we're going to use Azure OpenAI, and you're going to be amazed at how quickly we can get this moving along. Welcome back. I struggled a little bit with this one. I gotta admit, I am not at my best today, and I had to lean on ChatGPT itself for a lot of things. But it seemed and it felt like I wasn't making a lot of progress, but there's a lot of these little user enhancement, user experience type of things that you don't really think about when you try and mock up an interface that you actually have to solve. But let's take a quick look. Of course, ChatGPT has a sidebar, a text box, text input here, and a big section for conversations. Here we are very much similar. We have a sidebar. I haven't made any use of it whatsoever, but this is a good place for us to put some options. So say you have GPT-3 and 4. I don't really like it at the top here, but this is a good area to maybe put your credits and your name as well. But then we can have a conversation. So if you look at this example here, we have a long conversation where there's myself, ChatGPT, responding and being very helpful, ChatGPT. In this case, I'm just going to say, hi, how are you doing this evening? And ChatGPT responds. Now I've given myself a bit more space, and one of the tricks that I did was that I asked ChatGPT to respond in HTML format. You want to be careful, but I am just inserting it right there because I can. And so in this case, you'll see where'd my code go? Every time they respond, I am putting a div and the message right in here. And in theory, it can respond with quotes. It can respond with larger text, smaller text, bullets. So I can say, can you give me a list of the major cities in Venezuela? And it might respond with bullets, yes. So it's able to do it in bullets. If we did it purely in text, it wouldn't be able to do it. I would not recommend this. This is another security kind of issue. So if I did have more time, I would take this prompt away, and where it says, please return all responses in HTML format with no quotation marks around them, I would suggest using Markdown because there's a very limited subset of things it can do. Whereas if ChatGPT was malicious, it can potentially send me, I don't know, JavaScript code, something that could brick my computer. So probably not within a browser, but I would do Markdown and have a converter. But for the sake of simplicity, I used HTML, and you can see that's great. Do you have a favorite city? Can you give me some ideas for a travel destination in Asia? So you'll notice that some of the things I did was so that every time it responds, it automatically scrolls to the bottom. And another thing that I did do is that enter, when you click enter in the text area, it submits. But just like OpenAI and ChatGPT, if I click Alt enter, Control enter, Shift enter, I am able to add new lines. So I was thinking of going to Japan, China, Malaysia. And you'll also see that the box was auto-expanding. to accommodate more and more writing space to a certain extent. So for example, if I decide to copy and paste this, I don't go overboard. At a certain point, I just rely on the scroll bar. So those are kind of fun things that we can do here. Good response. So how did we accomplish all this? Well, first of all, we use Bootstrap and jQuery. You can get away without jQuery for sure. It's, for me, speed of development. I think one of the first things I should be doing is deleting this and then asking ChatGPT to rewrite some of my jQuery code into plain JavaScript. There's nothing here that really requires jQuery. So we have that. We have the styling. You'll notice that there is a alternating white then gray, white then gray, white then gray. And that is all in the CSS styling. One of the troubles that we had was that Bootstrap, when you do when you put things in a container, it puts these massive it centers your text and basically puts massive margins on either side. And because of that margin, it was very hard to have the color extend all the other way. I was very lucky that I was able to Google this pretty elegant solution, and I'm actually going to remember this one because I've ran into this problem multiple times, and this is a really elegant, simple solution. From there, just basic JavaScript to have a off canvas. So at the header, I have an off canvas button. That was for our sidebar. And then the sidebar is actually called off canvas. This is entirely boilerplate, but I did put the button in a header so that I could fix it at the top position. At the bottom, I have chosen to use a footer for the text area input. And this footer is useful because it just stays at the bottom with the fixed bottom class. You'll also notice I have this loading bar. If you use the API, I have chosen just to wait for the response. However long it takes, I will just wait for it and display it all at once. Now, given that that's the case, especially if you use GPT-4 where it might take 10-15 seconds, you do need a bit of a loader here. So can you tell me more things I can do in Tokyo? You'll notice right here that there's going to be 3 loading spinners while it waits for a response. And then when it gets a response, and it's taking just a bit of time, then it disappears. That's where this code comes in. Now, this just shows the spinner, but basically we hide it with the display none, and then we show it at the appropriate times. In the middle, very, very simple again. We just have, ChatGPT, and we also have an empty box for the conversation. Now we're going to get into the code here. First of all, we have a running list of messages. Actually, I think we'll need a bit of code over here to do prune messages if too long. So we have this running list, literally a list. First of all, a system message to ChatGPT, or OpenAI, so that it understands what it is. You're an AI assistant, but you could say you're a developer, you're a stand-up comedian, you could be whatever you want. Gives it a bit of context as to what it wants to do. Then every subsequent message is going to have a role of user or assistant. So I might be a user and I'll say hello, and the assistant responds back saying good day. And so the role content. And the history and how this conversation actually happens is you send the last 3 or 5 or 10 messages in that conversation, and that's what it's basing it off of. So right now I'm sending one message. Then when it responds back, I have to send 3 items in that message. The system, what I asked, its last response, I guess 4 messages, and my new question to it. And then the next time, I'd have to respond with 6 messages, then 8 messages, and it goes longer and longer. So one thing you might want to do is prune it. Azure Chat prunes it at 10, which makes a lot of sense, but it is an arbitrary number. You can be a lot more clever about it as well. So we'll prune messages if it's too long. Then, when we click the send button, we hide the chat-gpt name, so we don't need that anymore. We lengthen the message by taking what was inside the text box. We're going to send the message, which is engage with the API. We'll look at that function in a moment. Then we have another function that says add to conversation. So this is my function where aesthetically I put a message into that into the web page so you can see. Then we're going to show those loading bubbles. We're going to clear off that text area, so delete your message. We're going to shrink it back down to a small size. We're going to scroll to the bottom of the page. Now, the 2 major functions that we wrote is first, adding to the conversation. Every time I ask a question or ChatGPT response, I'm going to add into what we see. So every time it runs, I'll add a block, then another block, then another block. So here, we can be a bit more clever, but for now, I have, depending on the role, created an emoji, or rather an icon. And so there could be other differences. So I could, for example, put a header. I could do 2 different styles. I could anchor it left and right, show 2 different styles, but this one seems simple enough. But that's why the role is important. Then the message. So here, every time I'm going to create a new block, a new div, showing the emoji on one column and then the message in a separate column. Then we append it to that conversation. So every time there's going to be one, then another one, then another one. The next one is the actual send message. So when you set up a OpenAI instance in Microsoft Azure, you're going to get OpenAI Studio, and you can go into a chat playground and view code, and you're going to see exactly how you can engage. You're also going to see your endpoint and your key. Now, I'm obviously deleting both the key and the endpoint, so don't even bother trying to copy this. But this is a massive security flaw. So if I post this web page to the public, anyone can start using this and start using your credit card and start making calls. So you want to hide this. But for simplicity's sake, just to get this project up and running, I left it here as the quickest way to do it. So in this case, when we send message, we're going to go to that API URL, we're going to use the API key, and we're going to send a bunch of data here. The big one is the messages, and then all of the rest is not all that necessary. I will do another video about this, but there are a number of options here. One of which is being able to stream. So my current example, tell me about Sensoji. I'm waiting for the whole response, but if you ask ChatGPT, it's going to start typing along the way. Tell me a joke. And it's going to start, one sentence and another then another, whereas I'm just waiting for the whole response. So you have that streaming option. The other one I'm really excited about is that there is a data source aspect. So if you subscribe to other Microsoft Azure services, you can bring your own data, and this all happens in this request data. So if you bring your own data, you're going to say where the endpoint of that data is, the key, some of the options around that. Anyways, it's a simple post REST API call. You're going to send them over. When we get a response back, I don't really need to console.log it, but I'm going to hide the loading screen. I'm going to add it to a conversation and scroll all the way to the bottom again. Very simple, straightforward. And all of this can be done really quickly just because Microsoft is really the one doing all the hard work. It's this API. It's not making the calls to it. Finally, I have some extra code. This one is one I found online on GitHub. I've used it before, and this allows a text area to expand. I will note that this dividing by 16 is very imperfect, but it's okay for a reasonable amount of text. And it seems to have worked fine a lot when I've used it in the past. The other one is this code right here. ChatGPT helped me write it. That will intercept the shift and enter key when I type things. Okay, I've been talking a while, but what I wanted to say is that the two big security flaws, both of them have simple solutions. In this case, the HTML format, just don't do it. Use Markdown, use something else, or say just in plain text, no HTML. I'm using this as a shortcut, but this is a really dumb idea with a really quick fix. You should just import some sort of Markdown encoder and decoder and ask for Markdown instead. The other big security flaw is, of course, this API key and API URL. Wherever you share it, you are going to potentially allow people to use your credits on Azure OpenAI. The solution to this is you still need to make API calls. The solution to this is you put all of this behind some other hosted service. So in my opinion, if you're doing this as a hobbyist, the best way is Azure Functions. It's practically free unless you scale really high. It only runs when necessary, and this is a really simple thing to pass off to Azure OpenAI. Azure Functions. So in your Azure Functions, you would use Fast API or some other thing to create an API and basically create another endpoint. You might want to put some guards around when you can interact with that API, but at the very least, even if you have no guards on that API, you won't be exposing your API key because you will just make a call to your own API. You can control a bunch of these things. You can even hide your prompt in there. Nobody has access to it, and then you get a response back through Azure Functions. You pass it back straight to you. Now, when you do Azure Functions, you can limit it. So in this case, I would host this index.html, for example, on my own website. Let's say ansonlight.ca or unscriptedcoding.com or something like that. And you can use cores within Azure Functions to say, ignore anyone making calls, only calls coming from that website are you going to respond to, and that should put enough security between you and malicious actors. Anyways, I hope you found that helpful. The main point here is that creating chatbots, we could use ChatGPT, we could use those deployments that Microsoft has, but you can also build your own very quickly. Even on my off day here, I did it in, I guess, an hour or so. And it's useful in this case because Microsoft's ready-made solutions are these whole packages that you deploy online. In this case, this is a really simple piece of code. I can shrink this down and put it in the corner of my corporate website, put it in the corner of my customer client area, just put it somewhere and hide it away and make it a much smaller part of a web page. That way, you don't need anything super fancy, but you can make it still very usable. This HTML code basically goes anywhere. We could put it in just about anything, whereas those Microsoft packages we've looked at in previous weeks, those are very strict on what infrastructure you use, what tools you're using, how it's being designed. This, if your company runs a wiki, if it runs some internal web pages, if it has its own corporate web page, if it has, of course, Microsoft services, all of those are viable ways where you could just throw some code. In fact, you can throw this up on Google Sites or MySpace or something as well. So I think we're going to put a bit more time into this next week because there's just a little bit more I want to build out on this. But this is a great start. So stay tuned next week. We're going to do a little bit more with this project. Thanks for watching. Bye.